Hey there, time travelers! Can you imagine having that much legroom on a flight today? Back in the golden age, airplane cabins were incredibly spacious and comfortable. The seats were oversized and could even recline into flatbeds. You could stretch out and really relax. None of this cattle class cramped seating we put up with nowadays. The roomy cabin layouts allowed for wider seats spaced farther apart. Plush fabric covered the seats, not this scratchy synthetic material of today. And the armrests! Oh, those glorious expanses provided ample space to spread out. No more battling it out over the tiny shared territory. Speaking of luxury, let's talk about the food. Airline meals used to be an elegant multi-course affair, prepared by accomplished chefs. We're talking dishes like Chateaubriand, Oyster Rockefeller, and Baked Alaska for dessert. All served on real china and linen, not those flimsy plastic trays. Can you even remember the last time you had a decent meal on a plane? I can't. Course after course would arrive under those iconic aluminum dome lids, maybe starting with a savory soup or crusty bread to dip. Then a refreshing salad with a house vinaigrette. Then an entree plated with elegant garnishes of fresh herbs and vegetable bundles. And for dessert, an airy souffle, or a decadent layer cake accompanied by fresh berries and rich sauces. But the pampering didn't stop there. Flight attendants, who were called stewardesses or air hosts back then, had to meet strict physical requirements. They were trained in etiquette and served meals with white gloves on. It was an era of true airplane glamour. Stringent height, weight, age, and even marital status restrictions were in place for these onboard ambassadors. Their uniforms were stylish, yet immaculately tailored affairs, complete with crisp hats, gloves, and kitten heels. Every step and gesture had been drilled to embody grace and professionalism. Can you imagine showing up at the airport dressed in your Sunday best nowadays? You'd probably get some funny looks. But back in the golden age, flying was a special occasion that called for the finest attire. Both men and women dressed up just to travel. Suits, dresses, hats, the works. It made the whole experience feel so more luxurious and exciting. We're talking silk stockings, white gloves, and impeccably shined shoes were a must for well-heeled lady travelers, while a smart fedora, crispy pressed suit, and a leather Oxford let the dapper gentleman cut a striking silhouette. No schlubby sweatpants or grimy sneakers in sight back then, when air travel was a prestigious affair. The unique experiences didn't stop at the gate either. Many flights had onboard pianists providing live entertainment during the trip. Tucked in a corner near the bar area, a tuxedoed ivory tickler would serenade the cabin with show tunes and standards. And who remembers air stairs? Those mobile stairways that would roll up to the plane's door so you could easily board and deplane. It made arrivals and departures feel so elegant. Stepping from the tarmac into that pressurized cabin felt a bit like entering into an exclusive club. The low lighting, plush seating nooks, and soft strains of piano provided an intimate and refined ambiance. For those brief hours aloft, you were transported to another rarefied atmosphere apart from the everyday hustle. The golden age of flying had a big influence on airport architecture and aircraft design as well. Airports started being designed around the idea of travel as a special event. Terminals had soaring ceilings, huge windows, and opulent details like chandeliers and grand staircases. The planes themselves were masterpieces inside and out, with sleek aerodynamic curves and lavish interiors. Take the iconic TWA terminal at JFK, for instance. That stunning concrete and glass airport design from 1962 had sweeping curves inspired by an exotic bird in flight. Inside a lush lobby lounge awaited travelers with deep crimson carpets and sculpted hardwood accents. First class all the way. The aircraft themselves took an almost spaceship-like quality in their Art Deco-influenced designs. From the Douglas DC-3's sleek metal fuselage to the lozenge-shaped Boeing 307's pioneering pressurized cabin, flying felt as much like a voyage into the future as a journey over the clouds. Of course, all this luxury came at a cost, literally. Airfare was extremely expensive back then. Only the wealthy could really afford to fly. Does anyone know what the average cost of a flight from New York to London was in the 1950s? Take a guess. It was over $1,200 round trip. The price was so astronomical that less than 5% of Americans had ever stepped foot on a plane by the 1950s. Travel for most people was primarily by train, ship, or car, so flying really was the height of luxury and status then. So to put that into perspective, the median household income in 1955 was around $4,600 per year. So that round-trip transatlantic airfare could eat up over a quarter of the average family's annual earnings. No wonder suits and cocktail attire were the de rigueur amongst the well-heeled jet-set crowd. The whole air travel experience was just so different back in those days. It was a lot more relaxed and casual once you got through the gate. You didn't have to arrive 2 hours early, take off your shoes, get your body scanned, or any of that rigmarole. You just kind of showed up and got on the plane. No wonder people got so dressed up. Security was minimal, and there was little in the way of screening procedures. About the only requirement was obtaining a traditional paper ticket and checking any larger bags at the counter. Then you could stroll leisurely to your gate and right onto the awaiting aircraft. That's not the only thing that'll surprise you about the golden age, though. You could also smoke on board. Yep, cigars, cigarettes, pipes, you name it, all allowed. The cabin would just get filled with hazy smoke during flights. Thank goodness we don't have to deal with that today. Could you imagine having to breathe in secondhand smoke for hours while trapped on a plane? No thanks. In fact, many flights back then carried personal ashtrays and lighters right in the seat back pockets. The unmistakable scent of stale tobacco would permeate the cabin just as much as that aviation fuel on the tarmac. It's amazing we ever made it out of those smoke-choked aluminum tube flights without emphysema. One last fun fact about this bygone era. Many flights actually had flight engineers on board whose job was to monitor and control the plane's critical systems. Their roles have largely been replaced by computers and automated systems now, but back then it was an extra set of hands and eyes keeping an eye on everything. While the pilot and co-pilot handled takeoffs, landings, and overall aircraft operation, the flight engineer was charged with managing the nuts and bolts, fuel mixtures, engine temperatures, hydraulic systems. They were on-board mechanics ensuring every metric stayed in the green during the journey. Keep an eye on those runway relics tucked away in the overhead bins. They may just contain the seeds of inspiration for aviation's next glamorous renaissance. Perhaps soon, we'll all be able to enjoy the good old days of luxury air travel again, just with a delightful, fresh new spin to match the modern mile-high spirits.